So I think we could start.
Sure.
I think we could start. Yeah, we said sort of 5 past, but there's it's always nice to have a little bit of a pause while people arrive. But just to say again, if you didn't hear, then please do put something in the chat just to say who you are, where you're from, and what you're hoping to learn or do today. Find out. And also, at any point, if you've got any questions, then feel free to put it in the chat. We haven't got a separate Q&A, so if it works out that way, then in about an hour, then or perhaps before that, we'll come back and see what the questions are and try to answer them all together if we can. So today's supposed to take 90 minutes. It might take a bit less if we find that we've covered everything we need to cover. And we haven't actually timed this, so I don't know how long it will last. So, Gabriele, do you want to put the slides up and we'll talk a little bit about who we are?
Actually, before we start on the slides, I would like to start on a poll, just 2 simple questions for us to get to know you. So I'll launch the first question, which is about if you are more of a qualitative or a quantitative person. That will be interesting. There should be a pop-up on your screen right now. So we're seeing some results coming. We're about more of a qualitative group here. I'm seeing 8 votes, 5 for qualitative, 3 for quantitative, which is interesting. Let's see. Oops, I lost the poll. Here, there you go. Let me launch the second one then. And the second question is about how often do you do systems mapping or causal mapping in your work? Never, sometimes, very often. It's okay if you've never heard of any of these approaches before. We just need to know what do you do in your daily work, so we know how to communicate our presentation. So most of the people never used either systems mapping or causal mapping, which is great. You're going to learn a bit about causal mapping today. Our quantitative people are winning the poll right now. So we have 6 votes for quantitative and 5 for qualitative.
But it's close, which is good. Yeah, somebody's mic's on somewhere in the background. I don't know if we're able to switch them off, are we, Gabby?
Yeah, I think you can.
Right. Oh, great. So there's a few more people in the chat saying who they are and what they're hoping to do. That's great. So, Gabriele, could you perhaps put the slides up and we'll start talking.
There you
If I
go.
can find how to switch them up. So I'm going to try to switch off. Oh, it's gone now. Great. So welcome to today's webinar. I'm Steve Powell and I'm from Causal Map Ltd near Bristol in the UK. And Gabriele?
Hi everyone, I'm Gabriele. I'm the outreach coordinator at Causal Map and I'm based in Recife, Brazil.
So we are a tiny micro consultancy, just 2 people. We promote causal mapping. Causal mapping has been around for a long time. It's not just us. It's been around for about 50 years. And we have an app which helps people to do causal mapping, but there are other ways of doing causal mapping too, which we'll also mention. You don't have to use our app, and our app is also anyway free for a lot of purposes. So I hope you don't get too concerned like we're just trying to push a product or something. We're also trying to very much trying to engage in a community of causal mapping and encourage people to use it. So there are lots of different ways of using causal mapping, different purposes, but the most common thing is probably you've got a stack of interviews, or maybe reports, or maybe interviews and reports, and somewhere in that information, somebody is talking about what changed, or what is changing, or what causes what, or what leads to what, or what influenced what. If you're an evaluator, probably that's probably the most fundamental kind of data you've got, is like whether it's just opinions, or whether it's just chat in an interview, or whether it's like a report saying this is the case. Mostly we're interested in how things influence one another, either through the perspective of the respondents, or maybe somebody's claiming that's really true, or maybe it's an expert saying this is really the case. So how do you do? And what I've done in the past is, 10 years ago, I was just like writing all of this in on a big whiteboard or on the wall, putting pieces of string between all the different things that I'd found out when I was doing my evaluation. Maybe up there was the theory of change as well as some kind of version of all of these arrows, but it was quite frustrating to do. So there's two ways you can get around that frustration. One is you can just, more and more people are doing it, they just say, ChatGPT, here are these 50 reports. What's going on? Tell me, is this project efficient or something? And you can totally do that. And as most people know nowadays, large language models are very good at making a very convincing story, and probably the story is mostly correct, and probably the quotes nowadays are even accurate, but you don't really know how it's arrived at that conclusion, and anybody could just read a load of reports and come up with a conclusion. So you can't defend the answer because you don't know how ChatGPT or whatever has arrived at that, so it's not professional, basically. Or you could read it all yourself, which is what we used to do, and what we still do to some extent, but it doesn't scale, does it? It works with maybe 20 interviews, or maybe 50 if you get a very systematic way of doing it, but beyond that, forget it. So there is a better way. We're going to tell you about what you can do specifically with the Causal Map app, specifically to map out theories of change, but there are other uses too for causal mapping. So in this case, we're mentioning very much what AI can do for you, but you can also totally do causal mapping, certainly, and the Causal Map app without being interested in AI. You can switch it off forever and do everything manually too. But either way, it's you, the evaluator, who retains the actual judgment at the end, like what does this actually say? So why causal mapping? Well, what we do is we take the text, and the text says the training gave me confidence. That's why I started the business. And this becomes training influences or produces confidence, and confidence leads to starting a business. So that's two links with three causal factors, as we call them, linked up by two arrows. And essentially that's what we do. And if you do that a lot, these arrows start to link up and the boxes start to link up, and you get something like an empirical, let's say, theory of change. So the next one, please. So this is, if you're using something like NVivo or Deduce or MaxQDA to investigate your interviews, or to look at your interviews or reports, one way to do it is, like in the first pink box, the floods destroyed our crops. You can highlight that, and you can just say the whole thing is like some kind of causal link, but that doesn't really work, because that theme, if you code it as a theme, that floods destroyed our crops, it doesn't link to the heavy rains caused the floods. The floods isn't exposed, you can't link it up to anything. So it's a very frustrating way, if you've ever tried it, to use qualitative data analysis in a causal way. There's another way of doing it, using traditional qualitative data analysis, trying to hack it to make it causal, is so the second way is you can highlight floods and then highlight destroyed our crops separately. And then later you can go back, and in some apps like NVivo, you can then create a sort of post hoc link between the two. It's also a bit frustrating. You've got to remember, you've got to go back, you've got to find the things and code them separately, code the link separately. And we also think that that's the wrong way around. We think that causal mapping is about thinking that causal claims are the fundamental source of data, the fundamental thing that happens. So We don't think, well, there's causal factors like floods or crops, which are just sort of there in the universe, and after that there's causal connections between them. We understand what people think are the main interesting factors in this universe by looking at the causal claims they make. So we do it all at once. So in the third, whoops, could you go back to the third one? So the third one, the blue one, what we do is, what causal mapping has been doing for 50 years is you highlight the floods destroyed our crops. That's a single causal claim, but at that same time, you say what's the cause and what's the effect, and doing that codes a link between them. So you end up with a table like that underneath with the quote and the cause and the effect and the source ID. And it's that table which is the fundamental product of doing causal mapping. Okay. So we are very clear right from the start that we're not intending to code facts. Some of these things might be true, but we don't care about that at the time. So we simply code up whatever people say. It's not proof. We simply code up what people say, and then we worry later about whether it's true or not. And often it's not even that important. So if you're doing public health research, for example, you want to know how people think about how, let's say, a virus is transmitted, and your main aim is to find out what people think. And we don't really, I mean, it's quite important whether it's true or not, but it's not important for your research. You primarily often want to find out just what people think. And sometimes you do need to know what's actually true about it. So yeah, so you don't need a special app to do this. Anyone could do causal mapping. Lots of people do it without realizing that's what it could be called. You can code it. So just hang on, yeah, you just go back. So you can code it. You can use any qualitative data analysis software, or just often people just use Word, and they just read things in the PDF, and they identify the causal claims and the causal factors, and then they put those all into like an Excel table or something like that, listing all of the causal claims. Sometimes there are 30 causal claims, sometimes there might be 30,000, and depending how much patience you've got. And then as a third step, often people then plug that into a mapping application like Kumu, a graphing application, and that Excel table then becomes a map that you can look at. So that's fine, and lots of really great people do it that way. But we thought, that's a lot of hard work. Could we not combine this into one? So we have a thing called Causal Map, which on the left you can see there the text coding window, and on the right you can see the map that is evolving, that appears as you do the coding. So it's everything all for you in one interface. But like I say, I mean, some people say, I'm super happy with Excel. I love NVivo. I'll just do it my way. And that's fine. That's still it's still real causal mapping. But what we're going to show you today is how to do causal mapping in this dedicated app that we've called Causal Map. So there's lots of different ways, sort of styles of causal coding. And lots of people spent a lot of time thinking about it. And we have spent a lot of time thinking about it as well. And what we've kind of come up with is the most, what we call minimalist coding. So we make life a lot simpler if we don't worry about how strong the link was. If somebody says, oh, this was super important for my harvest, or my harvest had a massively important influence on my income, or something like that, people most often don't say that. People most often just don't even concentrate on what the causal claims they're making. They just talk. And in the middle of those are all kinds of causal claims where they haven't specifically mentioned the strength or whether it was good for them, or sometimes we don't. So when we're coding, we don't go back. You can do, but we don't go back and say, oh, what do they really mean? Like a psychologist, like, oh, implicitly, they're saying this and they're saying that. Actually, I think they think this, which is a perfectly valid thing to do. But we don't do it, and we think it makes life an awful lot easier if you don't worry about these things. So we simply code verbatim just exactly what people said, more or less in the words, using the words that they used, and that's a very easy job. So you can give that job to a student from secondary school, for example, and with about half an hour's encouragement and training, they can do it quite well. And an AI can do it well. GPT 3.5 can do it. GPT 4.0 could do it pretty well. And today's large language models, they're almost too good for it. You don't really need the best ones because it's a relatively simple, in most cases, it's a relatively simple task that most people agree on, more or less, and AIs and people kind of agree on, like what's the right way to code up this sentence or this piece of text. There are differences, of course, but not fundamental differences. So we keep it simple. And you might see that sort of backstory to all of this is there are many ways of doing causal mapping, but we like the way that is fundamentally easy to reproduce. It's very transparent, and that makes it also very easy for an AI to do. So there are more sophisticated ways of doing causal mapping that are more kind of specialized, and you have to think about it for an awful long time and spend a lot of time over it and develop a special technique for each and every project, and that's fine too. But it's pretty time consuming and pretty expensive. And after all, AI is eating everybody's lunch at the moment. So if you can find a way that is defensible and also works quite fast and is quite easy to do, then that's a good thing. So that's just about what I'm about to say now. So like I said, we use AI as a clerk, not as an oracle. So it's tireless, it's exhaustive, and it's cheap. And when it's done all of that, then there's various other stages you can add to make sure that that you first of all, to draw some conclusions, and secondly, to check that those conclusions are actually a genuine reflection of what's in the data. So if you try to, even you can be like the world's best thematic analyst or the world's best grounded theory expert. They have this thing called saturation, where people say, oh, after 20 interviews, like the themes got saturated, and they probably did, but it also means like people got bored, right? Because I mean, there's a certain level of I've reached a certain level of detail which is acceptable for my work, and that's fine. But of course, you could go on and analyze another 50 interviews and find more themes and more angles if you had the patience, but you don't. No one's got the patience for more than 20 or 50 interviews like Max. But the AI doesn't care. The AI, can code up 500 interviews, and then at the end you say, actually, I think don't do it like that. I want you to do it slightly differently. And it says, fine, and goes back and do it all again, and try and saying that to a human after it spent a week coding, or if a human spent 4 weeks coding something, you say, actually, I made a mistake changing the code book. Please do it differently. And the human probably won't smile at you very much. So in particular, we have this thing now in the Causal Map app called one-click coding, that little green button you can see there. And that it makes loads of decisions for you, which we think are the best decisions. There are, in fact, loads of different things you can do while you're doing the coding, even in AI, and also when you're doing human coding as a human too. There are lots of different things to think about, different decisions, but this one-click coding makes a good job of kind of default settings, and you could put 100 interviews in and click one-click coding and wait quite a long time and come back and you'd find it's done all your causal mapping for you, and you've got quite a decent overview map and lots of other maps you can look at. But for serious work, I probably wouldn't recommend using the one-click beyond, let's say, a decent experiment or a demonstration or something. But if you really got specific questions that you want answering, you probably need to think about your prompts and your coding technique a bit more than that. But it's great for quick work. So, Gabriele?
Yeah, right. So some recent projects that we use causal mapping in the Causal Map app are very interesting because they differ a lot between themes and the approaches that we took. We just finished one with VIB in Brussels that we gathered with Qualia, our other app for qualitative data collection. We've gathered 100 HR interviews on career trajectories. We also, a couple of years ago, worked on a very interesting project in Chile with a university in Chile, interviewing 32 students on gender gaps in STEM, both at the university and also in the market in general. There's some projects that we made with other universities like UK postdoc feedback, and also InTrack, which was a very interesting project across 13 country governance programs, and the Love Alliance that we'll mention at the end more in depth. So an example of a causal map with not a lot of causal links is this one, which is the one we did in Chile. It's all in Spanish, but in here we can see that formal education at the start led to professional development that helped with professional improvement. This was 251 links that we coded, and you can see that there are some positive links in blue and some negative links in red, and the negative links are more about the gender gaps themselves. This is another example. This is the InTrack project that we worked on, and InTrack needed the bigger picture of the program across 13 countries. So we used AI to code more than 5,000 causal claims from outcome harvesting data, and Alistair Stray, which he was the senior consultant at InTrack, was the one responsible for interpreting and reporting the data that the AI coded.
Great. So we've actually got some publications coming out with some more publications coming out with more about the actual.
Now. Oh, you came back.
Oh, am I back? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're back.
Right.
Yeah.
So about the actual workflow, here's just 3 steps for the beginning. Really, it's rather different when we come to the analysis part. So obviously you want to start from the questions. So what do you want to be able to say at the end, and to whom? Sometimes you're coding very exploratory, but still you need like exploration, but still you need to know approximately what kinds of things you want to say in order to be able to start your causal mapping journey. And it's quite good to be able to write down just a few examples of what you might, oh, sorry, can you go back? A few examples of what you might like to, could you go back to the previous one? Doesn't want to? Doesn't really matter. I can't hear you either. There we go. Yes, so everything follows from that question, and it obviously makes a difference to what data you gather and also the labels you use and the kind of coding you do. So yes, please, the next one. So like we said before, causal mapping is a very special kind of thing, and it's good to set out what it doesn't do. So it's good at which factors matter the most, were most frequently mentioned, how groups differ, how factors are connected to one another, at least in people's minds, causally. You can compare it to theory of change, but it's causal mapping, the way we do it, it's not suitable for if you want to calculate things like effect sizes or make an estimate of the actual strength of a causal link, because we're not really modeling the world, we're modeling people's worlds, we're modeling the worlds that people live in terms of what causes what, the way they think the world works. And on its own, we certainly can't prove. So the fact that 27 out of 30 people said that the improved seeds caused their crops to grow, it doesn't mean we've proved it. It's extremely interesting evidence, but it doesn't prove it. So you need to pick the methods that are the methods that answer the questions you want to answer. If you're trying to estimate, downstream river levels or something like that, then causal mapping wouldn't be the right thing to do. It's just fundamentally about the social universe and about how people think about things. Although it's been used absolutely in ecology and biology too, as a kind of as a way to understand the system rather than try to actually model it. So when you're coding the claims, you can write a short instruction. It says here for the AI, but you can do it for yourself as well. If you're coding manually, you're still good to have like a guideline about how to code. Really, the process isn't really any different between AI coding and humans coding. It's what we call manual coding. It's just the AI does it a bit faster. Normally, you'll test it on a small sample, a varied sample of different kinds of respondents, different kinds of reports. And And then if it's just not working quite right, you go back and change your rules and do it again. Humans often do this in a fairly sloppy, intuitive sort of way. But if you're dealing with the AI, it makes you write it down, which is actually quite good for the procedure. It makes it more transparent and more reproducible. People, there's a lot of polarization at the moment about AI is a good thing or AI is a bad thing. And of course, it's both. But here's an example of where using AI in your workflow can actually improve your work because it forces you to write things down and not be quite maybe as intuitive as you might otherwise have been, which for many, not all kinds of research is a good thing. And of course, you're going to have a quote behind every link. So there's a kind of text analysis in the end, and you always want to have a quote behind it. You can do causal mapping. You can even use the app, the Causal Map app, for other kind of just like consensus coding where there isn't a specific quote behind it, but it's not something we're going to focus on today. You always need to check the links, obviously, especially if the AI is doing it. But to be honest, if someone else is doing it for you, you get two humans doing it, and you probably disagree about some of the coding you've done. So you have to go back and review whether it's an AI or a human doing it. And most important is where you've got systematic. What you're looking for is systematic errors or disagreements or things you want to tweak. So just sort of random mistakes are maybe not so important. If there are not too many of them, but it's very interesting to isolate, I'm fundamentally coding different from my colleague, or the AI is doing it differently from how I wanted it, because it's misunderstanding this rule. Often people say, oh, the AI is getting it wrong, but that's really not helpful. The AI is super clever nowadays, and it's probably a lot cleverer than I am, and it can follow the rules if you want it to. It's just that you haven't told it the rule clearly enough, or you've got something in the back of your head that you forgot to share with the AI. So go back, tweak the instructions and do it again. Nevertheless, you will find somewhere you think, I'm not sure about this or this link. I'm not sure if the person's being sarcastic here or not. So often we use other metadata attributes in the app to say, I'll tag this link as doubtful or unclear or revise or review, and maybe come back to it later, or maybe exclude them if I want to just focus on data that I'm really sure about. So actually using the app, is this where I do a demo? Yes. Oh, yeah, it's free. Yes, I'll just mention this. So you can sign up for the Causal Map for free forever. The core functionality, all you need to do causal mapping is there. You can make as many projects as you want, as big as you want, for as long as you want. The only catch is that it might not be a catch for you, but it would be for some people, is all your projects are viewable by other people. So if you're using public data or non-sensitive data, that's fine. But if you're doing work that's sensitive or where it's, you've got a privacy agreement with respondents or something, then you'd have to get a subscription, which is 19 British pounds per month. But you can also ask us about discounts on that if you want to. And then there's higher level subscriptions for teams and organizations and more sophisticated functionality. Free users even get free AI credits, a certain number per month. It's enough to do a reasonable amount of coding. I think I worked out maybe 300 pages or something like that. You get that every month. But if you don't want to use AI, and some people don't, there's a big switch, you can switch it off, and then there's no AI happening. And if you want to do your processing like in the EU to make it more GDPR compliant, you can do that too. Right, so I think it's my turn to share my screen, which is Chrome tab, this one. Yes. So this is approximately what you'll see. Well, when you sign up to Causal Map, it will give you like a choice. What do you want to do today, kind of thing, and then depending what you choose, the app will open in a sort of different configuration. But assuming you just want to do, we've got an example file, 2 interviews. The app makes a copy for you of this example file so you can code it yourself. In this case, the first interview is coded already. So this is the name of the project. Here we've got the sources. In this case, it's just 2 interviews called 1 and 2. 1 is coded, 2 isn't coded. here you've got this tab, you've got the text. It shows you the text of that interview, and you can see where it's already been coded here. And this next interview, this one, you can see it's not been coded at all. There's no links in it. And because there's no links in it, there's no map. So I'll go back again to, I could look at them both at once, which is the same as looking at the first one because the second one doesn't have any links coded in it. So just have a quick look at the rest of the app. So you create your links here. Later you can filter them if you want to look at only some or focus on a certain thing. Over here is the map. There's also other things. You could look at all your different projects you've got. You could look at all the sources within this project. And there are also tables of the factors, the most frequent ones, and a table of all the links, one for every link in the map. And there's other tabs here for more advanced things. So let's go back to the basic thing you're going to be looking at, and especially if you're coding manually, thing you'll be doing most often. And if you look at where someone's coded this already, it says cuts down on the noise and the stress. So Lego cuts down the noise and the stress. So click on that, and you can see a little slice of what's been coded, and you can see the kids are occupied, not fighting, and that leads to less noise. So that's how that's been coded. You can see there's many links here, and each one of those corresponds to a link over here. Less noise. Where was it? I'll click on this one. Let's see. Oh, that's all right. Kids occupied, not fighting leads to less noise. That's that link here. Let's look at the next link. Less noise leads to feeling okay, feeling I'm doing all right, being a dad. There's the quote. It's from less noise to feeling okay. Of course, I could change that. I'd say, well, it's not really correct. I might want to edit that. I might want to add another thing. I might want to start editing this, make it different. But I could add other things to it, but I'm not going to right now. I'll leave it the way it is. So that's been coded, maybe I think that's all right. You notice that some of them are red and some of them blue, because in this case, we've coded it also with sentiment. So here, the sentiment was +1, sentiment's -1 or 0, neutral if you want to. It's especially useful if you're doing a lot of coding or AI coding. We normally do that. So you can see here's all the red ones, they're all negative effects. And in this case, they're all positive. It's not very useful here, but it's very useful when you get a more sophisticated piece of coding where there's some of the things have different valences for different people. Sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing. So if I go on to the next source, I'll just show you what it's like to actually code something. What brings you joy? Moments, glimpses. When mum, she has a flicker. So that's what brings you joy. So I'm going to highlight that. And as I highlight it, this box springs up and it says, so mum has a flicker, meaning I think she's probably got a kind of dementia. So Chloe is happy when she sees mum has a flicker, and I say just joy. So it's very simple. I'm just using the words in the text. I'm not using any kind of code book, but the factors that I've already coded come up here. They get offered as possibilities, which is useful as you start to build up your code book. Of course, you can use a predetermined code book. You can input a predetermined code book and use only or primarily the ones in the code book if you want to. So in that case, I've coded that link. It won't be obvious here because we're looking at both interviews, but if I take out the one we've already coded, we're just looking at source 2, and that's that big link that we just coded. And in the factors table, because we're only looking at the second source here, we just have these 2 factors and just one link between the 2, which I can at any point edit or delete or change or anything I want. When you've done a lot of coding, you'll often find that you want to do like systematic recoding. So you think, oh, I'm not going to use this term, I'm going to join these factors together, I'm going to split these factors into different groups. You can do that with, you can search and replace individually, or there's a bulk edit feature if you want to manage all of those difficult tasks when you've got hundreds or thousands of codes. If you're using AI, there are other ways to do that in a more effective way. So in terms of AI, it's also over here. And today is also the day on which we're kind of officially version 0.9 or something of our AI coding. And if you want to try that, you can. This is the one-click coding. I won't actually demonstrate it here because it normally takes between sort of 5 minutes and half an hour, depending how much text you're using. So I won't do it now, but if you were to want to code with AI, there are a lot of things, like I said, to think about, lots and lots of things to think about, which you're probably not going to understand to start with, but there's just this thing called one-click coding. I'm not going to do it now, but I'm going to click that button to start the process. And it says, these are the decisions that the app's made for me. If I'm happy with that, just click run. But if I'm not, then I'm going to do it right now. So I'll just say, no, I'm not going to do it now. But that is what you would do if you wanted to do one-click coding on all or some of this data set. Now then, as you can see, it's a fairly big app. There's a lot of things you can do with it. If you get stuck, then there's help. There's an interactive help, which is connected also to the buttons. So if you want help just on this particular thing, you press this particular button and the help opens just at that place. So you can read all about it. There's also a standalone guide, which is more like something you can sit down and read. If you click here, you can search the help and so forth. But probably the most exciting part, once you've done your coding, is to do the filtering. So I'm going to look at both of the bits of coding that's been done, and I'm going to show you a little bit how to do the filters. So this is the whole map. It's quite a simple map, but supposing I want to look at everything that feeds into mark feels okay, because this is a nice target, it's an interesting outcome. So I'll put the factor label filter in this filter links, that's by default. That filter's always there, so I'll put mark, show all factor labels. Mark feels okay. That hasn't popped up, has it? So that's now reconfigured to show just the immediate causes, if you like, of Mark feeling okay with just one step up. We could say 2 steps up. So what are the causes of Mark feeling okay? That's just one very small example, but there are lots and lots of different filters that you can add to do all kinds of different things. When you get a more complicated map with hundreds or thousands of links, then it's very important to have these kinds of filters to make sense of your maps and to answer specific questions. So you might want, your question might be, for example, is there any evidence that playing with Lego leads to Mark feeling good or to peace in the family or something like that? So you can use these kinds of filters to answer those kinds of questions. And as the theme of today is theory of change, you can configure the filters to match up with something like your theory of change. And Gabriele has got some examples of this later, to show, well, this is, and we've done this quite a few times, so this is what the respondents said. We've tried to use labels when coding which are kind of similar to those in the theory of change. So the items, the factors are quite similar, but the map is quite different. There's very different links, and people mention all kinds of links that weren't anticipated and maybe some outcomes which weren't anticipated. So that's already a massive evaluation output in its own right, and you can really write half of your report from that all on its own. There's just one more thing that I've not mentioned while we're looking at the app, is these formatting controls. So there's lots of things you can do here. You can change the direction and the layout and just about anything you want. You can do conditional formatting to use different colors to show different things. We won't get into the details of that. In this case, we just change the direction, and you can also, like I said, click on these things to examine them more, delete them, rename them, etc. Right. I think that's probably enough right now from me. So, Gabriele, would you like to give us a couple of examples in a bit more detail about how we use this in terms of theories of change?
Of course. I'm going to share my screen again. Go. Can you see it?
Yep.
Lovely. Right. So, as Steve mentioned, we can use Causal Map and the maps that we create in the app to question our empirical theory of change. And the way to do that is using the filters in the app, just like Steve mentioned. So we like to say that the links are not a static report. They are a living map. Our data set can be questioned in very different ways to show different perspectives and answer different questions. So, for example, if you want to see if women and men tell different stories, you can split the map by group and see the links that each group highlighted, lighting up in a different way. In the same way, you can see if you want to see the influences of a program activity, for example, leading to the outcomes, you can filter to the specific factor, for example, cash transfer, to look downstream of the change and see what the maps that come out that show every reported consequences with counts. This is just the examples that I mentioned, but a very important part of doing causal mapping and analyzing your data set in the app is to be aware of the transitivity trap. So the transitivity trap is what happens when you change two causal links from two different sources into a bigger chain with an indirect effect that not necessarily neither of the sources actually claimed. So, for example, here in the slide, the pig farmer says that the cash grant led to more cash, and the wheat farmer says that more cash led to more seed. Unconsciously, we would think that more cash grants lead to more seed, right? But that's wrong. The middle factor, more cash, appears in both. So when we zoom to a map to show a more top-level view, these two links become a longer chain, showing that cash grant led to more cash that led to more seed. It looks safe to conclude that cash grant led to more seed, but no one actually said that. The pig farmer never bought the seed, and the wheat farmer never had a grant. So in this case, more cash might be the same words, but it's exemplified in two different ways, in two different contexts. So the safe move here is to, when you want to visualize a longer pathway, you need to lean on sources whose own accounts run through the whole way through, because two halves don't always make a true whole. So an important part of analyzing data, any kind of data, but mostly when you're using AI, is to take a step back and judge. So behind those beautiful maps that Steve showed, there could be hundreds of codes behind those links. So it's very important to question those links. Does the claim hold up? Do the links really belong to the same context? Did the AI understand the context and even the cultural differences when it was coding that data set? So we like to treat what the outputs that the AI create as a first draft, and it's very rare that the first output will be the final map. So we always edit it either to be accommodating to the donor's language or just to fix any errors or inconsistencies that the AI made. And this is a QR code to the app.
We're gonna put the link here in the chat as well. So going to a real case study and evaluation that we did with the Love Alliance to show you how we actually created an empirical theory of change and compare it to the original theory of change. We can see that this is the original TLC that the Love Alliance program had, and it's a very beautiful ladder going from the strategies to short-term outcomes up to goals. It's very clear, very communicable, but a ladder cannot draw a loop. And very often in causal map and causal mapping, the approach, we see that the real accounts that people make often shows us feedback loops or even other kinds of loops that interact with each other. So usually, it won't be just that the activity impacted the short outcome and in the short-term outcome led to the medium-term outcome. Usually there are many other links connecting to each other and making a more complex causal map. So the interim evaluation that we did with the Love Alliance project was across 10 African countries and Southern Hemisphere, a company founded and led by women doing feminist evaluation. They hired us to conduct the data analysis, and we coded the narrative data that they had. We had a massive data set with 176 documents, 79 of which were country reports and 97 were interview transcripts. Out of those, we were able to find 22,000 causal claims that the AI coded, and this is a massive task. About a bit more than 60% of these claims were kept for the maps. So this is a very good link coverage for such a massive data set. And no team could hand code all of these, this amount of data and stay fresh. Like Steve said, we either get overwhelmed or get bored. So every link behind each link, there's a quote that we can verify if it makes sense, if it's correct, if the AI made a good job. This is an example of a real map that we created with the Love Alliance project, and this is one of the examples of the strategies and the activities leading to the goals or the outcomes. So this is an actual map that we can compare against the theory of change, and this is one of the examples that we call an empirical theory of change. So in this case, we see that this map was built from the interviews, and the most mentioned factor is the main activity created by the Love Alliance, which is to provide support and advocacy and capacity building. And this led to many other interesting outcomes and mid-steps to the goals. And the story that people told was that we built each other up, which no ladder predicted. The theory of change, the original talk, didn't account for all of those interacting loops. This is another example in which we see now a perspective of the movement building, and we see that networking here is the main driver, the main impacted, and also the main driver of change. It's in the middle of the causal chain, and it has reinforcing cycles, like we mentioned. So, for example, capacity in the bottom here feeds to peer supports that also feeds to capacity. This is a reinforcing loop. Another example is that networking in the middle enables activities, which then feeds to more networking. However, when the Love Alliance team had a legitimate concern, if the program's own advocacy could be making things worse by stirring up a backlash against the very communities it was trying to help, which was women's and LGBT people. So rather than debating that in a room, we decided to question the data. This is what Causal Map helped us to do, to treat a concern as a researchable question and not just an opinion to be managed, right? So we trace the backlash question through 43 through the 43 sources that raised the concern, and every single one pointed the other way around. The program actually was helping communities to resist the backlash and not causing it. So no source names the program as the cause, and we can see an example of a quote that is behind one of those links that says that the advocacy activities also helped to counter the backlash against women's rights and LGBT rights. We're going to share this slide later, but there's a link here to read the full case study, which is very interesting. We recommend you to do. Okay, so what? We know that causal mapping can help you question your theory of change. But everything in causal mapping comes down to one simple thing, which is X influenced Y with a quote. So we have an influence factor, a consequence factor, and a backing quote, and that's it. Everything else that becomes much more complex is just a combination of all of those 22,000 links combining to a single beautiful map. So first you capture everything, and you can do that at scale and cheaply with AI doing much of the work, and then you judge. So coding and inferring are two different tasks, and keeping them separate is what makes the whole thing defensible, right? So this is not a statistical proof. It's a disciplined, transparent way to assemble evidence, and one where anyone can trace a finding back to the original quote and challenge your reading. And so you can reach a conclusion that you can actually stand behind. And if you don't have a data set to code to test the causal map in right now, you can use the Qualia Interviews, which is our second app. And Qualia Interviews is a chat-based app that uses AI to lead conversational interviews, qualitative conversational interviews. It runs as a chat interviews that asks people what changed and why, and follows up in their own words and in any language. And you can tweak the interview instructions for your interview objectives and purposes. And the answers come back as just normal transcripts, narrative texts that you can download and code into a causal map. So this is the kind of thing we do every day in Causal Map. We just code every day and find causal claims and create beautiful maps. And you are free to try. You are welcome to come and try that. And if you want to go from a stack of interviews to a theory of change you can defend, you can try using app.causalmap.app. Yeah, any questions?
Great. Well, thanks, Gabriele. That's great. You can see that there's a lot to talk about, and there's obviously, you could talk about the app has got a lot of different things you can do with it for hours, and we do have videos also on YouTube to help you understand. But there's also overlapping with that is causal mapping itself is quite a powerful tool, but it's also not a very targeted tool in the sense it's not like, let's say, most significant change where you've got pretty much kind of the steps you have to do, but there are many different ways of using it. You can use it for many different things. It's not an evaluation methodology on its own. It's not a methodology on its own at all, but it's more like a toolbox that you can dip into to do different things. So there's a couple of questions there, or just one question from Caldas. Well, that's a good question. How do you determine when unexpected outcomes from the data are substantial enough to incorporate into the empirical theory of change? Well, how long is a piece of string, as they say? It's a kind of an open question. Well, it depends, of course, how you're coding. If you're coding, let's say you're coding with AI, and let's say that you've given the AI a code book, which is, as we often do, a kind of a hybrid. So we say, these are the official theory of change items and maybe sub items. Try to use these where you can. But if you find something that really doesn't fit under any of these, then invent your own. Of according to a certain kind of rules about how it's going to label the ones that it's invented. And this works quite well. It's not the only way to do it by any means. It works quite well. And there, if you see you've got 3 top-level outcomes in the theory of change, each mentioned 40 times by 30 different sources each, and you've got another one which is mentioned 80 times by all of the sources, then you're probably going to want to think about it, including it in the theory of change. Of course, including in the actual formal theory of change is another thing, but as an evaluation outcome, as a report outcome, you're certainly going to want to mention it. And probably you'll mention anything that is mentioned with the same sort of frequency as the items in the theory of change, but which are conceptually distinct from it, that are quite clearly meaning something else. So that's one way to do it. There's many other ways to do it too. And of course, it depends what your evaluation brief is, and maybe the evaluation commissioner is not so interested in that, or maybe they're super interested in that, which they often are, especially if they're negative outcomes. Hopefully people will be interested in that too. And if you code with sentiment, as we encourage, and the AI does that very neatly, then it's easy to identify which are possible negative outcomes. None of this is completely straightforward, because often you have to think like, well, the theory of change has got one kind of language to talk about something. A lot of people use a different kind of language. Is that really the same thing or not? So you might, in that case, want to look at normally, always, you'll look at the individual text and say, people really do mean something different here. Or you look at the text and think, actually, people are talking about pretty much the same thing. They're just using a more familiar word for it, or a less technical word for it. So in that case, you might want to, and with AI, it's so easy to recode. You just say, go back and recode it all again, or recode these ones again. Or maybe you'll put into the instruction for the AI coding, look, people are often using this phrase, whereas we're expecting this phrase, but actually it's the same thing, for example, or it isn't the same thing, distinguish between them. So there's a lot of work. There's still always work you need to do around that. The AI can't decide that for you, but it can do make a lot of contributions to helping you.
Just jumping in and complement what you just mentioned, Steve. A very good approach when using AI to code a data set that you need to compare against your theory of change is to give a lot of background, not a lot, but like a bit of background enough of the project, of the wording that the project uses, of the context that those words could appear in during the interviews, to help the AI understand and make a differentiation between the words of the TOC and the unexpected factors that appear during the program activities. So a very good approach that we like to use when we are dealing with evaluations that want to see the talk language in the maps, but we also need to understand what are the contextual factors and what are the unexpected factors that were not accounted in the TOC, to use the original theory of change language. So we create a code book based on the TOC, but we also give the AI the flexibility to create other codes if it finds examples different enough from the theory of change language to be judged as an expected factor or a contextual factor or anything that was not accounted in the theory of change. And that's very useful for when you need to judge those different situations.
We also have an AI technique. Well, it's not really AI. It's large language models, but not really AI. It's NLP really technique, which we call soft recoding or magnetization, which is a super interesting thing. You can data set without any knowledge of the theory of change. So simply using words that people are using and consolidating those into a completely empirical theory of change without any reference to the real one. And then you can use semantic similarity. So large language models or NLP models know how similar certain phrases are. So you can then, using a special filter in the app, you can drop in, you can paste in the terms, the words in the theory of change, or the labels in the theory of change, and say, go figure, like which of these, they're like magnets, which of these magnets in the theory of change pick up which of the existing coded labels and which don't. According to a certain, you've got a slider for similarity and say, only let these magnets only pick up the naively coded items up to a certain, with a certain, let them only pick them up if it's a very strong attraction, if they're very similar. And so then what you get is suddenly, it reconfigures itself, and then you get a map showing only the phrases from the theory of change with the original labels recoded, attracted to these theory of change labels. So it looks words-wise just like the original theory of change, the official one, but with maybe different links or maybe the same links. And you might find that depending on the level of similarity you set, you might find that it's pretty adequate and the theory of change pretty much covers what people said, but using different language. Or you might find no, there's a load of material that people have talked about which have got nothing to do with the theory of change using this semantic similarity slider. So and that way you can try out different theories of change too. You can say, well, there's a different theory of change, or a feminist theory of change, or a Marxist theory of change, or whatever you like, and drop them in and see how well the actual material fits some hypothesis about what people might be talking about. So that's a very nice feature, called one of many of these advanced features in Causal Map, it's called the soft recode filter, and it uses what we call magnetization, which is just like a way of thinking about semantic similarity, which is a nice thing to try out. But I think for that you need not the simple subscription. I think you need a bit more of a subscription for that. So I'm not quite sure.
Lovely. I did put a link here to a forms for the people that want a certificate, and we did get a feedback that I want to comment on. Someone suggested that we have more follow-up practical sessions to improve applications, and this is a very good opportunity for us to mention that we are going to have a drop-in session in the next few weeks, talking about AI in the Causal Map app. So please sign up to our newsletter. This way you can see all of the events that we are holding. We are having a lot of different webinars this month. On the 16th of June, we'll have a session with the causal pathways talking about robustness with Causal Map. And we'll share the news on the AI drop-in session in the next few days. So if you're interested in anything that we're doing, that's the way to go, because we always share everything we're doing in the newsletter.
Great. So I think if just last chance to ask a last question. If not, then I think we can wind up. We don't need to stick to exactly 90 minutes. We've put in, 90 minutes is a long time anyway. We've put in a lot of resources in there, so feel free to have a click and sign up if you'd like to. And there's the what we call the garden of causal mapping ideas, which gives you lots of text and hints on how to use the app and how to think about causal mapping, and all of that is free for you.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Please feel free to follow us or connect with us in LinkedIn. We are always sharing our ideas there as well. And we look forward to connecting with you in other opportunities.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day, or afternoon or morning, whatever it is for you.